Okay, prynawn da pawb. Ni'n mynd I symud ymlaen I session 3. We're going to move on. I have 3 agenda items. We're going to continue with the trilogy of events from Mr Tim Llewellyn. We're going to look at the report of the Standing Committee. Mr Tim Llewellyn, Chair of the Committee, will present the Standing Committee report and move the recommendations set out at the end of the report. The recommendations will then be seconded formally, and we will put the 2 recommendations at the appropriate point, and we will take a vote then. So I ask Mr Tim Llewellyn to present the report of the Standing Committee.
An apologetic Tim Llewellyn, Lay St David's. I'm sorry, you've got me again. So, this is now the report of the Standing Committee. I will assume that you've all read the report and so won't go through it in detail. However, I suggest you have the Standing Committee report in front of you. If you look for it on the interactive agenda, choose your language and click on the report itself, or if you use the drop-down buttons, it may be found in the folder entitled Session 3, then choose English or Cymraeg to view the report in either language. Before taking the recommendations, there is one matter that I will mention. A diocesan secretary has contacted the Secretariat, who mentioned that one of his diocesan conference members inquired if there was any change in the maximum age for members of the governing body in elections, which was subject of a question from Mrs Hannah Wilkinson at the governing body meeting last September. In my reply at the time, I said that I would return to the Standing Committee. I'm able to confirm that the Standing Committee took note that a motion to effect the removal of the maximum age limits for the governing body and diocesan conferences had been intended to be brought to the governing body in April 2024. This did not happen, as the member who wished to bring it was unable to be present. The Standing Committee therefore noted the background situation and the current arrangements for age limits in the Church in Wales, which have been in place following the governing body adopting a comprehensive report in 2016. The Standing Committee noted that while a member of the governing body may wish to see the abolition of all age restrictions, it was felt that there was a possibility that this might have unwelcome, unintended consequences. The committee did not wish to recommend any revision of the current situation at present, and recognised that members of the governing body may bring a debate to the floor of the governing body. I'll now go straight to the recommendations. When I propose recommendation 2, the approval of the whole report, members will have a chance to comment or question on any part of the report. When we are considering the first recommendation, I'd be grateful if you would just comment on the specific proposals in it. So the first recommendation relates to dates and venues of governing body meetings. The Standing Committee considered the dates for governing body meetings for the years to 2030 and recommends the proposed meeting dates between 2027 and 2030. Settling the governing body's meeting dates now will allow other provincial meetings to be planned around them. The Standing Committee also noted that the governing body meeting arrangements have already been made for 2025 and 2026, and these are set out in paragraphs 19 and 20 of the report. I therefore propose the adoption of the proposed meeting dates for the governing bodies from April 2027 through to September 2030.
Thank you. And could I ask Dr Heather Payne to second?
Thank you, I second.
Thank you. After the report. After the approval of the report. Could you move to the approval of the report, please?
Okay. So we're not discussing those.
We will after the approval of the report.
So I'm now going to move on then to the approval of the report as a whole. So the motion before you is that the report of the Standing Committee be approved.
Can I ask Dr Heather Payne to formally second the motion?
Thank you, I second the report.
Can I go to a vote?
Take speeches now, and then we've had 2 separate votes.
Okay. And now the floor is open for comments. Could you come forward, please, so I know who is, how many of you wish to speak, and can we remind you that you say your name and which diocese you represent?
Kevin Ellis, clerical, Escobar Bangor. I just note, in light of the previous business, that 2028, the governing body is due to meet in Easter week, when we might have said that all clergy are entitled to be on holiday.
Thank you. Are there any more comments or questions from the floor?
So I'll take which one from two, then move the actual vote on the dates.
Right. Ruth?
Ruth Rowan, co-opted cleric, Monmouth Diocese. I'm looking in other matters down at the very bottom of the report at the self-evaluation that's going to be sent out to the ministry areas. Just looking for some clarity about what that means exactly in terms of whether that goes to ministry area leaders, whether that goes to lay co-chairs of ministry areas, and whether there will be an opportunity, if there are divergences of view within a ministry area, for those to be represented, or whether ministry areas will be asked to give one answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Richard Mulcahy, Monmouth Co-opted. Very briefly, at least I hope so. We're setting up dates apparently for governing body meetings until the next decade. But one of the discussions we have tomorrow is to how the governing body could meet in the future, whether it's going to have the same sort of structure, the same sort of footprint. How setting dates may therefore not always be helpful if we're going to go to a slightly different structure. More importantly, while setting those dates and while considering the locations for governing body meetings, what work has been done on calculating the overall footprint of people travelling across Wales in this way. Thank you.
Any more questions? Any more comments? Thank you.
2030 isn't the next decade, is it? It's the last year of this decade.
Kate O'Sullivan, cleric, Monmouth Diocese. In the interests of inclusion, can I draw your attention to the paternity policy? In the case of same-sex couples, that may not actually be the best description. That's just my comment.
Thank you. Tim, would you like to respond?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Picking up on a couple of the comments that were mentioned there, we will look again at the 2028 dates because I think they potentially are in Easter week there, so we will look at that. And just picking up on the point then regarding the impact of calling everybody into a central thing. I think we went through quite a bit of a learning curve when we went through the pandemic and we tried to do online meetings and that sort of thing. And I think as a governing body, we decided that actually, well, not decided, we believe that we are humans, we thrive on social interactions, and whilst I think there's a place sometimes for very specific business to be transacted via an online format, I think we all arrived at the decision that actually we need to come together because there's an awful lot of benefit can be obtained, not necessarily just in this room, but actually in terms of the discussions and the fellowship that we have outside of this room. We are, however, always mindful of the environmental footprint and the impacts that we have on that. And finally, then, as far as the self-evaluation form, I will have to come back to you on that in terms of how that document will actually be circulated and with whom and what guidelines will accompany it.
Diolch. So we move to a vote on the date of the governing body meeting. So the proposal is that the governing body meets on the following dates between 2027 and 2030. The decision is by simple majority of the governing body. Or Blaid, for?
Order, Chair.
Sorry.
Could the proposer clarify whether he's withdrawing the Easter 2028
Right. Thank you.
I think probably we would have to. But basically, I guess what I'm asking you then is to confirm the dates other than the April date for 2028.
So
Thank you.
The proposal is to vote on the dates as suggested, apart from the 2028 April. Those for or blaid? Diolch. Yn erbyn, against? Ymatal, abstentions? Diolch yn fawr. The motion is carried. The recommendation is carried. We now move to the adoption of the report. That the report of the Standing Committee be approved. Again, the decision is by simple majority. Could you hold your cards up as you did previously? O blaid? Diolch. Yn erbyn? Against? Ymatal? Abstentions? Diolch yn fawr. So those are carried. We now move to agenda item 12, adroddiad Pwyllgor Sefydlog ar Faterion Cyfreithlon a Llywodraethu, a report of the Standing Committee on Legal Governance Matters. Mr Tim Llywelyn, Chair of the Standing Committee, will present the report, commenting on the main sections and move the recommendations as set out at the end of the report. The recommendations will be seconded formally by the Archbishop. Mr Llywelyn.
Thank you. So during the course of my presentation of the report, I shall be proposing 3 separate motions. The first of these motions is to invite the governing body to endorse the view of the Standing Committee that the Church in Wales continues to operate a system of internal controls of sufficient robustness to enable the Church in Wales to retain the ecclesiastical exemption from listed building to consent, and to request that the review of the faculty system outlined in the report proceeds to the next stage of its work. The second is a motion to make changes to the Constitution of the Church in Wales. And the third and final motion is that the report be received. As with the report of the Standing Committee, which we've dealt with earlier, at Agenda 11, the time for debate on the report as a whole, or questions not relating to the particular constitutional changes proposed, is during debate on the final motion. But first we move to the individual recommendations. All references to pages and appendices relate to the Standing Committee's report on governance and legal matters dated September 2024. If you're looking for it in the interactive agenda, choose your language and click on the report itself, or if you use the drop-down buttons, it may be found in the folder entitled Session 3, then choose English or Cymraeg to view the report in either language. It will greatly assist you if you have this document to hand. Each recommendation that is set out, together with an explanatory note in the report. The summary of recommendations is on page 7, and the proposal to amend the Constitution is on Appendix 1. Appendix 2 is the drafting of the new paternity policy for information, and see paragraphs 13 to 16 of the report, and I will briefly outline each proposed amendment so we are all clear on what it is we are debating. So the first recommendation relates to the faculty review. And if when we get to questions that there are specific questions relating to the faculty system, I beg to ask the governing body authorise Mr Alex Glanville to be able to support us in that particular point. So recommendation 1 relates to the report of the review of the faculty system that the Standing Committee discussed, and the details are set out in paragraphs 1 to 6, with the reasons for the recommendation set out in paragraph 7. Please note that the report itself may be found in the General Documents folder on the website. It does not appear on the interactive agenda, as the governing body is not asked to debate the report itself, just the conclusions of the Standing Committee. Chair, I move recommendation 1.
Thank you very much. Could I ask the Archbishop to formally second?
Formally second.
Thank you. The floor is now open for debate. Would you please come forward if you want to ask questions or make any comments?
Bob Evans, lay member, Monmouth. I'm also chair of the Monmouth DAC. I don't wish to trespass on the time of the governing body. I certainly strongly support the recommendation of the Standing Committee, but I just wanted to get on record 2 quick thoughts. If you've studied the report, you'll know that one of the reasons for retaining the exemption is the ability of the church to balance the needs of heritage against those of mission. I feel we need to give that point more weight, perhaps, than it has been given in the report. This isn't an academic conclusion. As far as I'm concerned, it's a very practical concern that arises, perhaps not on every faculty, but certainly on most of them, certainly those that involve reordering, the removal of pews, changes to church structure. And I feel very strongly that only the church can balance those 2 issues. It's not something that the civil process can do, and I have some experience of that. And so I think it is absolutely vital that this responsibility stays with the church. My second point is one that hasn't been included in the report, but it's something I feel very strongly about. And that is, only the church is in a position to take a long-term view of its property. A lot of our churches have been around for 5, 6, 7, 800 years, even longer. My own's been around for 140, but that's still quite a long time. It's very difficult for the civil process to do more than look at the single issue in front of it. Whereas we have the ability, I don't say we always use it, but we have the ability and the expertise to look at our churches and say, they've been around for 600 years, how do we make sure they're still around for the next 600 years? And I think that's a thought which we want to bear in mind when we consider the role of the faculty system. So thank you very much for allowing me to make those comments.
Nicholas Cook, elected lay, Monmouth, also Chancellor of the Diocese of St David's and President of the Provincial Court. I strongly support the retention of the faculty system and the continued existence of the ecclesiastical exemption, and I made representations in the course of this review with those considerations in mind. The secular planning system has a firm discipline as to what is and is not a material consideration. It will never include the mission of the Church in Wales in that list. If we want that to be regarded as material, we must retain this jurisdiction. The other consideration, which has not been mentioned so far, and I won't repeat the points raised by the last speaker, with which I entirely agree, is a question of cost. If we expose ourselves to having to use the secular planning system, it will cost us a great deal of money, which the Church would be better served in spending elsewhere, as the Chancellors and the DACs provide their services free of charge. I realise the delays intrinsic to the system can be frustrating. I can assure you that work is being undertaken to improve that position, but it is better than the alternative. Thank you very much.
Yes, it's me again, Richard Mulcahy, Monmouth. 2 points. One is to remind people that the faculty system covers all churches, not just those who are listed. If you have a modern church, sometimes asking for changes to that take just as long as if you were trying to repair a cathedral. And the process needs to remember that things that would happily be accepted by the secular planning system for a non-listed building perhaps need to be treated with a little more care than you would for something that is 500 years old. And on that point, to defend my colleagues in Cadw and elsewhere, they deal with buildings that are 2,000, 1,000 and whatever length of time. Yes, they're not using them for the same purpose. After all, we wouldn't particularly want the Killeen Amphitheatre to be subject to the same purposes as it was originally built for. But do not think that somehow the church are the only people who know what to do with 500-year-old buildings. There are many, many, many people in the system who are equally able to help. But I'm entirely in favour of this process. Diolch.
Diolch.
Reverend Matt Davis, cleric elected Monmouth Diocese. Fully in support of this. I think the faculty system is much better than the planning system in that way, and having to deal with planning systems being conservation area with one of my churches and things like that, it is not good. My area is also in an area of deprivation, skills deprivation, monetary deprivation, and just general unearthed talents as well that are there. This does leave us in a position where we have many listed buildings around myself where I could throw a rock, an unlisted rock, by the way, and I will hit a building which is listed, which has fallen into disrepair, has been set fire to by accident, or has just simply fallen down. I would implore the governing body, my own diocese, to please look at ways in which we can support places like my own in dealing with things like the faculty system in some of our unlisted churches, has been mentioned, as well as our listed ones, because we do not have the resources. I'm told to go to an architect to get stuff done, and I've had a £1,000 bill to go to the DAC with an initial proposal. Fair play with a large piece of work, but that is £1,000 which we don't necessarily have. That's £1,000 away from the mission of the church. I believe the faculty system is the right way to go. The help that is there has been incredibly helpful. We've had even from Alex Glanville recently. Thank you very much. For various reasons. But there needs to be support put in place as well on top of what we have, because it cripples in some places as well. Thank you.
If there are no other comments or questions, I invite Mr. Andrew Glanville to respond.
Thank you, Your Grace, Chair, Governing Body. Alex Glanville. As of Friday, my job title changes. I'm going to be called Director of Property Strategy rather than Head of Property Services. That sounds rather grand, but the idea of that is that my life for the next whatever number of decades will be spent trying to make sure that the way we do property is as good as it can be, using the 20 years of experience I've had in my current role to do that. So I'll do a little less of the operational stuff, although I won't be able to help myself, but a lot more of the strategic stuff. So this is absolutely one of the key things that I'll be doing in the next few years, is working with Professor Doe on this faculty review. So I just wanted to say, this first piece of work, I think you're voting on now, about ecclesiastic exemption, is a key thing, because deciding that is critical to deciding what kind of faculty system we need in the future. But I also wanted to say that the next stage in this process, and we're embarking on that now, is much more looking at the actual system we operate. So today, this vote is about exemption, principle. The next stage is about how faculty works, and how it works for our ministry areas, how it works the right way through. That's the rules, the regulations, even down to the online faculty application system that we use for you to apply for permissions. So what's going to happen is Professor Doe at the moment is putting together basically an analysis of the system, is writing down how this thing works, all the different aspects, the rules, the jurisdictions, how it covers listed buildings, unlisted buildings, and so forth. So all of that he'll summarise. We will then send that out in a big consultation exercise to all stakeholders. You'll be able to comment, you'll be able to make your views known about all aspects of the rules, the regulation, the system, the online faculty system, so that we can gather that together and then out of that form some recommendations that will ultimately come back to this governing body, probably, well, we're aiming at next September. So you will have a set of recommendations for how this faculty system should be improved. Hopefully, there'll be lots of discussion before that to make sure people are on board with that. And then the end result of that will be a set of recommendations, which it'll be my job in part to then try and turn those into the new rules and the new way in which we do things. So this is a really important stage, but the next stage is the nitty-gritty of this system that we operate. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm very grateful to Alex just for giving us that additional insight and background. So what I would formally like to do now is recommend the adoption of recommendation number 1, and that is the governing body endorses the conclusion of the Standing Committee that the Church in Wales should continue to operate a system of internal controls of sufficient robustness to enable the Church in Wales to retain the ecclesiastical exemption from listed building consent, and requests that the review of the faculty system outlined in the Standing Committee report proceeds to the next stage of its work. I formally recommend.
Thank you. Could I ask the Archbishop to formally second?
Formally second.
And now we go to a debate. To a vote, sorry. We've already had the debate. So, by simple majority, those for o blaid? Diolch. Those yn erbyn, against? And those abstentions? Ymatal. Diolch. The motion is carried. I ask Tim now to go on to the second part.
Okay, I'll now be taking you through logbooks, terriers and inventories, cathedrals. Pay attention. When the Diocese of Monmouth was established, there was no cathedral church within the boundaries of the new diocese. Subsequently, St Wooler's Church, now more commonly known as Newport Cathedral, was granted cathedral status, and more recently, pastoral reorganisation means there is no parish annex to Newport Cathedral and therefore no PCC or Ministry Area Council. This amendment therefore makes clear that the Dean and Chapter have responsibility for the logbook, terrier and inventory at Newport Cathedral rather than the no longer existent PCC. An equivalent amendment in the Cathedral and Churches Commission rules was passed by the governing body in April 2024. This is one of the other 2 places in the Constitution where there was a reference to the PCC of St Wooler's Newport. Chair, I move recommendation 2.
Thank you. Could I ask the Archbishop to formally second?
I think I might.
Okay. Thank you so much. The floor is now open for debate. Any comments? Any questions? No? Really? Okay, so we'll go to a vote. By simple majority, those for or blaid? Diolch. Yn erbyn, against? Ymatal, abstentions? Diolch yn fawr. That is passed. Thank you. Could you go on to the third item, please?
And I was up all night studying logbooks, terriers and inventories too. Hey-ho. So finally, we move on to recommendation number 3, and that's approval of the report. The final matter in this item is to debate and approve the report as a whole. Chair, I move that the report of the Standing Committee on Legal and Governance Matters be approved.
Diolch. Could I ask the Archbishop to formally second?
Formally second.
For the third time. Diolch yn fawr. Now the floor is open for debate. Diolch.
Ruth Rowan, co-opted cleric, Diocese of Monmouth. And I hope you'll forgive the extremely pregnant person for wanting to talk about the paternity leave policy. Obviously does not apply to me. However, I imagine most of you do know this. Only 1 in 20 babies are born on their due date. That means that 19 out of 20 people who might want to take paternity leave don't actually know when they need to take paternity leave. And unlike me, who has a very generous amount of time that I can take on maternity leave, paternity leave is a really short period of time. It's really important that we enable partners of people who are giving birth and or fathers of children to be there when they're needed, not when a test from 8 months previously said they might be needed. And I'm quite concerned by some anecdotal stories that go around in the clergy parent circles about people being asked to book their paternity leave. It's not holiday, and also you don't know when you're going to need it. It's, of course, entirely reasonable that someone should be asked when they're expecting to have that baby so that people can plan. Same question was asked of me. When am I expecting to have this baby? However, at the same meeting, it was said, of course, if you've already gone into labour, you're not going to be expected to cover your Sunday services. Great, thought I. The modernity of the church in Wales knows no bounds. I am seriously concerned that the idea that a cleric should have to cover their own services whilst in hospital, whilst their partner or the mother of their child is giving birth to that child, is going to either stop them being the partner that they are needed to be and the parent that they are needed to be, or mean that something gets dropped in terms of people having the service cover that is needed. I think it's uncharitable, I think it's ungenerous to the parent, but I also think it's ungenerous to the parish for that responsibility to fall into the hands of somebody who might be watching their spouse rushed into surgery. And so I recognise the merit and sensibility of updating this policy because the law has changed and it needed doing, and I recognise that most of the policy is inevitable and sensible. But in terms of the procedure for notification, I would like to sort of invite another bit of thought, firstly about the idea that 28 days notice is needed to change the expected start date of your paternity leave. If your spouse has just gone into labour, 28 days is a lot more notice than you think you're going to get. And also the expectation that the cleric whose partner is in labour should be the one who arranges cover for their services during their paternity leave. Surely one of the benefits of the ministry area system and the support that we have around us is that that job could be done by another person, as it would be if you had had a serious accident or were on sick leave, not because parents are sick, but because actually generosity and reciprocity should work in these circumstances too. Thank you very much.
Sarah Rowland-Jones, Dean of St David's, nominated Dean. I feel it's gone from the sublime to the ridiculous because I need to split a tiny legal hair. The chair of the RB and I were just talking over lunch about what a skill it is that those who produce legal texts, and my past life and negotiating international treaties has come back to bite me. Page 10, eligibility, first bullet point. If we introduce the word either, I don't know where it comes. Blah, blah, clergy must have been continuously in stipendiary office in the church in Wales for at least 26 weeks, preceding either the 15th week before the expected week of childbirth or the week of being matched with a child for adoption, or preceding the 15th week before either the expected week of childbirth or the week of being matched with a child for adoption. I think that could do with being clarified because it makes a big difference on the 15. There's an extra 15 weeks which may or may not be there in the second context. Thank you very much. If you need me to put in an amendment, if somebody could tell me where the either should go, I can happily add that amendment.
Thank you. Adam Pawley, St Asaph elected. I support the motion. Just a couple of things that it makes me think of is one, I mentioned earlier I've got 4 children. My first 2 were born when I was in theological college. And at the time, I wasn't in receipt of a stipend, but the theological college, St Michael's Llandaff as it was very kind in enabling me to have 2 weeks paternity leave at that time. And I wonder if such is considered on a sort of formal basis or already in place within for ordinance who become fathers and mothers too as well. And then the second point is just something that came to my attention very recently, but I can certainly personally think of a cleric. I won't name the diocese or indeed the province, but in the case of where a cleric loses their baby. And where a cleric loses their baby, it came to my attention very recently that where the baby is stillborn from 24 weeks, they're able to still take their 2 weeks paternity leave as long as it's claimed within 8 weeks of the death. And I can certainly think of the cleric in mind where that cleric's wife in particular would have probably been very grateful had the couple been aware of that situation, that they were to be able to take that. And I indeed imagine that, as would the senior staff within that diocese as well too. I just wonder whether there's any scope for incorporating or getting that point included within it as well too, whether it's formally or in guidance.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Next speaker.
Hayley Matthews, elected Archdeacon St Asaph Diocese. Just about the language really, we talked about paternity, maternity leave. I'm an adoptive parent, and in all of the legal documents that we were working with, it was parental leave and primary parent and secondary parent, which pretty much covers all the bases. So that might be helpful as an amendment.
Thank you. Can we give permission for Dr. Jeremy Duff to speak at the governing body, please? Thank you very much. Jeremy.
Thank you. Just to respond to the question that was made there, there is a clear parental leave policy at St Paddens. It's there on St Paddens website if you want to have a look. We will check it again if changes are made for the clergy scheme, but there is one there, so I can reassure you on that. Thank you.
We are going to adjourn the governing body and for coffee now while we consider the points raised, and they are quite technical, quite legal, and we need to present it back to you before we take a vote. So we are going for coffee. Could you be here back in the room promptly at 4 o'clock, please? Thank you. Diolch yn fawr. Croeso nôl i'r session. Welcome back to this session. And I would like to invite Mr Tim Llywelyn to respond to the comments and questions made regarding the approval of the report of the Standing Committee. Tim.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thanks very much for all the comments, particularly those relating to the paternity policy, which was included in the Governance and Legal Report. During the coffee break, we had quite a discussion regarding the various proposals or various comments that were made, including where should we insert the either, whether we should use Roman numerals or not use Roman numerals. And I think the safest thing is for us to take the whole of the paternity policy back to the HR committee rather than try and make an amendment here to an element and send other bits back. I think it's safer to send the whole thing back. So what I'm going to propose to you now is that what I would like to do is propose that governing body accept the report of the Standing Committee on Governance and Legal Matters as outlined, apart from paragraphs 13 to 16 relating to the Clergy Handbook paternity policy. So I'm asking you to approve the report in its entirety apart from paragraphs 13 to 16, and then we will report back on those once we've been able to get HR's input into it. So I formally propose that.
Thank you. So now we go to a vote. Those in favour or blaid? Diolch. Those against? Diolch. And any abstentions? No matter. Diolch yn fawr. With governing body's permission, Mr Tim Llywelyn would like to return to answer one of the questions from a previous item. Would that be acceptable? Can we have a show of hands, please? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So when I gave my report earlier on the report of the Standing Committee in itself, the Reverend Ruth Rowan raised a question regarding the survey, the self-evaluation documentation that was going to be produced for the review of the ministry areas. And I said that I would come back to governing body on that document. What I would like to do now is seek governing body's approval to allow Olwyn Linton-Smith, who is the Diocesan Secretary of St Asaph, who has put together that document or been part of putting that document together, to speak to governing body, and then we can answer that question now. But first of all, I need governing body to authorise Olwyn to be able to speak. So if,
could you please have a show of hands, please? Thank you very much.
Thank you, governing body. Olwyn.
Olwyn Linton-Smythe, Diocesan Secretary, St Asaph. Thank you for allowing me to talk about this. It was easier than trying to explain it to someone else. So this self-evaluation survey is coming out to mission and ministry areas this week, so you can look forward to that landing in your inboxes. The aim is for it to be sent to a number of members of your mission area conference, not just to one. And what we're looking for is a consolidated response from the mission or ministry area. There is, however, space in it for you to say if you disagree amongst yourselves on a point, and we encourage you to be honest about that. So if some people in the mission area think one thing, others think something else, please do note that in the comments. We want, as far as you can, for you to present a consolidated view, but there is room for you to note where there were differences of opinion. I hope you'll find the questions are useful. We've spent quite a lot of time as Diocesan Secretaries putting this together. It was a joint piece of work from us in response to a request from the Archbishop, and so we do hope you'll find it useful. There is a box at the end where it asks what extra support you would like from your diocese or from the RB. Please do use those as well, because we do want to be able to offer as much support as we can. I am here tonight and tomorrow. If you've got any more questions about the survey, then please come and find me. Thank you very much.
Tim.
I think that concludes the Standing Committee items.
Diolch yn fawr, Tim. Thank you. We'll now move to agenda item 13, which is adroddiad gan Brifysgol Cymru y Drindod Dewi Sant, a dwi'n falch I wahodd Mr Gwilym Dyfri Jones o Provost for Lampeter and Carmarthen campuses to address the governing body. Croeso.
For those of you who will be using translation facilities, I will be presenting in both languages this afternoon. The first part will be delivered in Welsh and the second part in English. Eich gras, fy mraint i'r prynhawn yma yw cael cyflwyno rhai o gyflawniadau mwyaf perthnasol y Brifysgol y Llynedd i'ch sylw caredig, gan hefyd gynnig ambell sylwad ar y modd y gallai'r Brifysgol a'r Eglwys yng Nghymru gydweithio'n agosach yn y dyfodol yn enwedig yng nghyd-destun addysg o bosib. Cyn hynny oll, fe hoffwn i fanteisio ar y cyfle hwn i gydnabod yn ddiolchgar gefnogaeth barhaus yr archesgob ac yn wir esgob Tyddewi i waith a chynhadaeth y Brifysgol. Mae'n anodd credu, ond arferai'r archesgob a minnau chwarae pêl-droed i'r un tîm yn Aberystwyth slawer dydd. Oes mae sawl blwyddyn ers hynny, ond cofiaf yn dda fod sgiliau pêl yr archesgob yn tra rhagori ar fy rhai unau. Does gen i ddim cof y mod i wedi chwarae yn yr un tîm ag esgob Tyddewi serch hynny. Gyfeillion, mae'n braf iawn eich croesawu chi fel corff llywodraethol yn ôl i gampws y Brifysgol yma yn Llambed. Rwy'n mawr obeithio y cewch chi ddeuddydd gwerthfawr a bendithiol yma gyda ni. Rwy'n deall serch hynny fod na rai problemau technegol wedi effeithio ar eich profiad chi hyd yn hyn heddiw, a dwi am ymddihiro i chi am hynny. Dyn ni wedi cysylltu â ffeirianwyr y Brifysgol a ffeirianwyr allanol hefyd sydd wedi teithio o Gaerfyrddin y Prynhawn yma gan obeithio ein bod ni mewn sefyllfa i ddatrys y sefyllfa cyn gynted a phosibl. Felly derbyniwch fy ymwiriadau mwyaf didwyll. Dwi hefyd yn falch iawn o weld y cyn is-ganghellor, yr athro Medwyn Hughes yn y gynulleidfa Prynhawn yma. Gŵr a weithiodd yn ddygyn dros gyfnod sylweddol o amser i ddatblygu'r berthynas rhwng y Brifysgol a'r Eglwys yng Nghymru. Gadewch i mi felly, ar ran yr is-ganghellor presennol, yr athro Elwyn Evans, gynnig trosolwg i chi a rai o weithgareddau'r Brifysgol yn ystod y flwyddyn academaidd 2023-2024, yn enwedig mewn perthynas a'i phartneriaeth barhaus a gwerthfawr ag athrofa Padansant. Ffactor sydd wrth wraidd llwyddiant fel ein llwyddiant i'n Prifysgol yw'r modd y sefydlwyd dros gyfnod o amser bartneriaethau cryf a sefydliadau yn y sectorau cyhoeddus, preifat a gwirfoddol. A mae'n partneriaeth ni ag athrofa Padansant yn enghraifft glodwyw o hyn. Partneriaeth sydd wedi arwain at ddatblygu darpariaeth ac ymgysylltiad o'r newydd yn ystod y cyfnod diweddar. Yn ystod y flwyddyn o dan sylw, lansiwyd prentisiaeth newydd tystysgrif addysg uwch, cenhadaeth a gweinidogaeth yn y gweithle, gan groesawu 9 myfyriwr llawn amser i'r garfan gyntaf. Gan weithio ar y cyd a nifer o enwadau ledled Cymru, mae'r rhaglen tystysgrif addysg uwch yn tarparu dull sy'n seiliedig ar ymarfer o gydnabod arweinyddiaeth mewn eglwysi. Cynorthwyodd y datblygiad i hangu mynediad a galluogi eglwysi o wahanol enwadau i ddarparu profiad myfyriol a diwynyddol gyfoethog ar gyfer eu harweinwyr. Mae hwn yn ddatblygiad o bwys y bwriadwn i ddatblygu ymhellach yn ystod y cyfnod nesaf. Mae'r Brifysgol hefyd yn ymfalchio'n fawr yng nghanlyniad adolygiad yr asiantaeth sicrhau ansawdd o ddarpariaeth a throfa Padansant y llynedd. Adolygiad a gydnabu ansawdd rhaglenni academaidd a gynigir, safon uchel cyflawniad y myfyrwyr a rhagoriaeth ei chymorth academaidd i fyfyrwyr. Fis Chwefror, cynrychiolodd yr athro Bettina Schmidt a Dr Timothy Baylor y Brifysgol yn seremoni o brwyo Padansant a gynhaliwyd yng Nghadeirlan Llandaf i ddathlu graddio un o gyrfannau mwyaf y bartneriaeth o fyfyrwyr BA. Braf hefyd oedd gweld myfyrwyr Padansant yn derbyn eu hanrydeddau mewn diwynyddiaeth ar gyfer disgyblaeth, gweinidogaeth a chenhadaeth yn seremoni raddio'r Brifysgol a gynhaliwyd yn y neuadd hon ym mis Gorffennaf. Yn yr un seremoni, braint i'r Brifysgol oedd cael cyflwyno doethuriaeth anrhydedd mewn diwynyddiaeth i'r Rhybarch Randolph Thomas, cyn gadeirydd y cyngor am ei gyfraniad nodedig i'r Brifysgol ac i'r eglwys yng Nghymru dros gyfnod sylweddol o amser. Rydyn ni gyd yn llongyfarch Randolph ac yn diolch iddo am ei waith clodwiw lles y ddau sefydliad. Let me now give the translator a well-earned break and proceed in English. In terms of research in theology and religious studies, colleagues from the Institute of Education and Humanities continued their engagement with several research projects supported by external funding bodies. For example, Dr. Angus Slater participated in funded collaborative research on issues of religious identity and state recognition, working with colleagues at universities in Rome and in Hong Kong. Dr. Slater was also part of a programme here in Lampeter designed to engage parliamentarians from Maharashtra in India in interfaith and intercultural dialogue. In addition, Professor Catherine Williams secured research funding to spend 2 months at the University of Lund in Sweden to develop a project entitled Judaism and Trajectories of Religious Interaction from the New Testament to the Quran, which included an investigation of the reception of John's Gospel in late Judaism. She will return to Lund later this month to deliver a paper at a follow-up symposium. A notable development towards the end of the last academic year was the secondment and appointment of the Reverend Canon Marianne Osborne as the new university chaplain, who will be working primarily on the Carmarthen and Lampeter campuses, and alongside the Reverend Sam Aldred, chaplain of our Swansea campus. The university is particularly grateful to the Bishop of St David's for his support with this appointment. The university looks forward to working with the new chaplain to cultivate and maintain the spirit of community on both campuses. Indeed, much needs to be done to rejuvenate and reinvigorate both campus communities following the recent pandemic. And the chaplaincy, I would argue, has a key role to play in supporting the university in this respect. In looking to the future, and following my initial conversation with the chaplain, there is now an opportunity for the university to re-establish the church school certificate for its trainee teachers. This would be a valuable additional qualification for our students and enable the university to further strengthen its links with church schools across Wales. This partnership could be further enhanced through professional learning opportunities, along with the publication of bilingual learning resources through Penialth, the university's educational resource centre, to support the delivery of the new curriculum for Wales. And finally, may I suggest that this is an opportune moment for the university, through Rhagoriaeth, its Welsh Language Services Centre, to offer its support to the church in furthering its use of the Welsh language. This is a piece of work that has been mooted on more than one occasion in recent years, and I just feel that now may well be the right time to take forward such an initiative. I'm very aware of the time, and it has been a long day for all of you here in Lampeter. So I sincerely hope that those brief remarks were of interest to you, and that our partnership will continue to develop and bear fruit as we plan for the future in a world full of challenges and uncertainty. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you.
Diolch o galon, Gwilym. Would any member like to ask a question or make a comment on Mr. Jones's presentation? Well, football comments now.
Dorian Davis, Bishop of St David's, First Division. I would just like to say how very proud the Diocese of St David's is of its association with Trinity St David's. Its work with the former Vice-Chancellor and the present Vice-Chancellor, and indeed with you for all that you are doing in this place. We hope that we will go on from strength to strength, i cydweithio gyda'n gilydd ac i sicrhau bod y coleg hanesyddol hon a pwysig ar wahân i Rhydychen ac ar gaint mae e'n lle hollol bwysig i addysg yn ein gwlad ni. Ac rydw i am cefnogi chi a rwy'n siŵr bod fy mod i yn ymddiddan yn siarad ar ran yr Eglwys yng Nghymru yn gyfan gwbl, bod ni'n eich cefnogi chi am popeth chi'n mynd i wneud yn y dyfodol. A diolch yn fawr iawn i chi. You were hopeless at rugby.
Diolch yn fawr. Well, that brings us to the end of the business for today. We will conclude early. Evening prayer will be in the chapel at 5 o'clock, so you do have some spare time until then. Evening meal, dinner is at 8:30 and 6:30. Sorry. I'll see the digital clock. And tomorrow breakfast will start at 7:30 and the session will commence in here at 9:30 where the Archbishop will take the chair. So, have a good evening and see you soon in the chapel.
Complicated, but we
got there. Simplified it. Should there be mention about clearing your rooms or